I'm Chris Williams, and coming up on WVU News, I'll tell you about an increasing threat to police officers across the country. I'm Chris Williams. Coming up on WVU News, I'll tell you what WVU students and faculty are doing to educate the local community about the unrest in the Middle East.
Chris?
Thanks, Alex and Emily. Statistics show that there are currently 59 registered sex offenders in Morgantown alone. So how easy is it to find out if a sex offender lives in your neighborhood? All you have to do is pull out your cell phone, download the sex offender app, type in your zip code, and all the yellow dots are the sex offenders. Multiple countries in the North Africa and the Middle East are fighting for freedom and civil rights. Countries like Libya, Yemen, and Egypt are all in a struggle to overthrow their current governments in hopes of democracy. I recently attended an open forum where foreign students voiced their opinions on the whole situation right here at WVU. WVU has about 30,000 students, and about 1,300 of them are foreign, so it's not always easy to inform others about their home countries. Suicide is a very serious issue in our society. Unfortunately, sometimes suicide prevention doesn't get the attention that it deserves. College life can be very stressful, and suicide is the second leading cause of death of students ages 20 to 24. Traffic incidents are always a concern for police, but 62% of the arrests made in West Virginia deal with domestic violence. And the spotlight on this nationwide problem hit home recently when 3 U.S. Marshals were shot, serving a warrant in Elkins. The suspect, 50-year-old Charles E. Smith, opened fire on the officers, killing 24-year-old Della Kotzpaneller and injuring 2 others. I spoke with one local officer who told me just how dangerous it is to be a policeman. I'm Chris Williams, and coming up on WVU News, I'll tell you what some college students are doing when the pressure is too much. Parents, listen up. The typical sex offender molests an average of 117 children, the average age being just 13 years old. So what can you do to protect your child? I found out some ways to help keep your children out of harm's reach. Lonnie Johnson of Utah has been charged for committing over 20 sex crimes, and officials say he may be let off the hook because of a loophole in the system. Doctors are saying Johnson isn't mentally stable enough to know what is going on. Regardless of the situation, Morgantown mother of 2, Dana Hennon, thinks the situation in Utah is unacceptable.
I think that's wrong. That's absolutely wrong. I mean, especially not to be questioned. And if he's saying he doesn't know, well, why don't you know?
58% of victims of sex offenders are under the age of 12.
It's understood that they don't talk to people that they don't know.
Lieutenant Harold Sparinger of the Morgantown Police Department says the police help keep kids safe by keeping track of where sex offenders live.
They have to obtain a permanent residency, and they have to be registered so that the local law enforcement knows exactly where they're living.
So how easy is it to find out if a sex offender lives in your neighborhood? All you have to do is pull out your cell phone, download the sex offender app, type in your zip code, and all the yellow dots are the sex offenders. Lieutenant Sparinger says there are also other ways to keep your kids safe from sex offenders. Always know where kids are when they are outside. Let your kids know how to avoid strangers, and the more kids they are with, the better. Hennon knows that there are dangers out there, and it does scare her.
These things are close to you, and they're real, you know. We think we live in a safe neighborhood because we know a few people in and around where we live.
There are currently 59 sex offenders that live right here in Morgantown. College students have a lot on their plate. Trying to keep up with everything pushes some students to their breaking point. WVU junior Kevin Diffley says sometimes he needs help to deal with all the stress.
Well, from time to time I take Adderall. It helps me relieve stress, especially when I need to get something done for a big project or a paper. It calms me down and helps me focus.
15% of college students take Adderall that is not prescribed to them, but sometimes that's not enough. A few weeks ago, a WVU student attempted suicide in a fraternity house here on campus. Research says suicide is becoming more common among college students. Director of Suicide Prevention at Valley Healthcare, Bob Musick, says many students feel overwhelmed.
It doesn't care about how much money you have, your status in life. Depression will grab you and it will kill you, and it's killing our kids.
Musick says 11% of college students consider suicide.
If this was a medical problem, that it would be called, people would address it much greater than what they do now.
Suicide is the second leading cause of death in West Virginia among young people ages 15 to 24, with about 13 suicides per 100,000 people. Musick says that suicide scares him, especially when it comes to kids.
It's killing our kids. which scares me that these kids don't become young adults.
Diffley understands why some college students are leaning towards suicide.
You know, it has to do with stress. A lot of times kids can't handle everything and it all comes crashing down at them at one time.
Music says it's important to recognize the signs of suicide, which are talking about suicide, staying in your room all the time, and not going to class anymore. Music says that if you notice any of these signs from anyone, get them help. So far this year, 17 police officers have already died in the line of duty. The number of officers being assaulted is continuing to increase across the country. Monongalia Deputy Timothy Hunn knows firsthand how real these numbers are.
And everything's finally under control and the adrenaline starts coming out. I mean, that's when I knew. I was like, oh man, you know, my wrist, I couldn't see any swelling. I couldn't move it. I mean, it was bad.
Hunn tore a ligament in his wrist while he was arresting someone. Hunn is the only officer that has been assaulted recently. Researchers are saying in 2010, 162 officers were killed, the most since 1974. In West Virginia, 1 in 8 officers reported a simple assault. 1 in 23 reported an aggravated assault. And on average, police officers are assaulted 3 to 4 times a year. Hunn says officers should always be aware during every call.
Yes, when every call we go to, there is a certain level of awareness. There's a certain level of risk to anything you do.
The simplest call can turn into something serious, especially today, said Hunn. For example, take this simple traffic stop. Traffic incidents are always a concern for police, but 62% of the arrests made in West Virginia deal with domestic violence. So when an officer answers a call, he can never be sure what's behind that door. Hunn says if the police show up at your house or stop your car, the easiest thing to do is cooperate.
Here's the thing. If we're there legally, you know, don't come over and cause a commotion because you're just going to add to the problem. You're making a bad situation worse.
Hunn's injury forced him into light duty on November the 3rd, and he will stay on light duty until April 19th. The revolutions in Tunisia, Libya, and Egypt are causing protests, rallies, and open forums all over the country, including right here in Morgantown. WVU has students from 90 different countries, including Libya and Egypt. These protests let students like Salah Jean Sheriff tell people about their country.
In American community, they have a lot of misconception about what's going on in North Africa and Middle Libya. Because he used the media, he said that there's Al-Qaeda in my country. That's not true.
Sheriff is talking about Libyan leader Muammar al-Gaddafi. Sheriff says open forums are important so people can hear the real truth about what Gaddafi is doing in Libya.
He bombing hospitals, clinic. He attacked ambulance, bombing open mosque, the place where people pray.
46% of Americans have a negative attitude towards Middle Easterners. Dr. Vivian Exartier believes these events educate the community about the Middle East.
Educate, again, the community also and the campus community about what people from there feel and understand about what's going on in their regions.
WVU has about 30,000 students, and about 1,300 of them are foreign, so it's not always easy to inform others about their home countries. Experts say 40% of the media coverage about the Middle East is negative, but Sheriff hopes these protests and discussions change the minds of Americans.
I think this event gonna help to send message to American people, mainly American people, what's going on. And I'm looking for this support.
Almost 100 people attended the open forum.